Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming back to the podcast. I've got a returning special guest, and another special guest has joined us today. So to my left, I have Mr. David Dillman, who is a fishing guide with over 30 years of experience in the Galveston Bay Area. And I've got Mr. Rayfield Conley III, who is a fisherman down in the kind of the inner part of the Galveston Bay estuary. And I wanted both of them to come on, not just to talk about fishing, but also to talk a little bit about spirituality. So guys, first, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for inviting us.
Absolutely. So David, as I said, you're a returning guest. I've had you on before. We've talked a lot about your origins in fishing. But just for people who haven't listened to that podcast or maybe not know you, can you give us a little bit of a once-over? Give us the basics of how you got involved with fishing. And then, Rayfield, I'm
got 35 minutes? No.
Ask you the same thing next.
You know, my dad got me involved at a young age. We had when I was a kid, not a baby, but when I was an adolescent, he bought a beach house in Matagorda, Texas, right on the Colorado River, and my love for fishing started there. And then, of course, you know, high school years come along and your direction changes. But I still fished in high school, and then after high school, I went to work for the YMCA for 9 years of Houston, and then in 1989, I retired from the YMCA and then started my fishing business in January of 1990.
Ray, how about you? What were your origins? Talk about your origins in outdoors.
Oh, I started out probably when I was about 8 or 9 years old fishing. My dad would take me fishing on a little bitty john boat all the time. And I just caught on to it, had a love for it. I think that after I kind of caught on to it, I started going and spending nights out on the water, a lot of time on the dike, learning a lot from the different fishermen out there. And then as I finished high school, some of the times when my friends would go out and they would go to nightclubs and the different places, I'd be out in the fog fishing at the dike. So that was a great thing to kind of keep me out of trouble a little bit.
Okay. David, talk about some of your earliest memories out there on the water with family.
With my family? Mm-hmm. Probably when my mother dragged me off the pier when I was like 8, saying she's not going to clean any more speckled trout because we probably already caught like 80 of them because there's no limit back then. You could catch what you want. And with my dad and in some of the party boats because we didn't have a boat back then. But those are and then in high school, my high school days, skipping school and going fishing first, and then coming back to high school. And, you know, our principal stopping, going, "What are you doing?" "Well, we went fishing early." And he goes, "You're just coming back for lunch?" And I said, "Well, yeah, that's what time I normally get back from fishing." So anyway, those kind of deals.
Okay. Now, Ray, you talked about fishing in a john boat with family. And, you know, that's obviously different than some big, nice, you know, boat that you see out on the Gulf. I mean, there's something about being in a small john boat. It's very intimate. It's a small space. You're there with family. You don't have all the luxuries of a big, you know, expensive boat. What were some of those memories that you had early in those days in that john boat fishing?
You know, I'd go out in the john boat and we'd kind of go into the Bayou Vista area, back into the areas back then. It was kind of cold a lot of times, and we would make provisions to stay warm. But one of the main things is that I would fish with my dad, and he would teach me how to, you know, take little pieces of shrimp and drop them in the water to make the fish come, and different things about artificial lures, which I never caught on to. But hopefully David gonna teach me that part of it. But the experiences of just beating them. You know, at a young age, I'd be out fishing, and they have all this years of experience, and here I am, 10, 11 years old with a popping cord, and I'd come home with the most fish. They weren't happy about it, but that was some of my best experiences.
So what does that experience teach you about life? You talked about, you know, just kind of learning how to beat those fish at their own game. I mean, there's obviously a lot of lessons. I've done a lot of fishing since I was a kid as well, and I can recall lots of memories and how that has kind of helped me in life. Some of those things that helped you in your life.
Well, one thing is that learning from experience and watching and paying attention to what others do and don't make the same mistake. It kind of goes along with fishing. You know, I would watch my dad and them throw out a shrimp, and they'd have the head and tail on, and soon I'd figure out to take the head and tail off because they wouldn't catch anything. And so I was able to catch fish because I made the change, which they could never catch on to, and was able to catch more fish than them. But in life, it's kind of the same thing. You know, you watch people do things and you try to do it better to be successful.
Or don't do what they do.
That's it.
So, David, where did fishing take you? How did you go from fishing with family in local areas to now being a tour guide that takes customers out all the time?
So a friend of mine, Captain Mike Williams, he was a fishing guide. And so I fished with him a bunch. We became friends. I booked a trip with him in the early 80s, and after that, we just became friends. And so I would tag along with him on fishing trips. And then I actually bought my first boat from him, a 16-foot John boat. But it had an electric start motor and steering wheel. I didn't have the tiller. I still don't even know if I could run a tiller. But anyway, so I started, and so just in going out to East Bay and just fishing where I fished with him in that John boat. And then eventually he kept poking and prodding me. You know, the John boat lived past its years, and then I started buying bigger boats. And so I finally bought a pretty big boat in the mid three-quarter 80s, not the late 80s, but a little earlier than the 80s. And he started like passing me some overflow trips to run some fishing trips. And so finally he talked me into quitting the YMCA and being a full-time fishing guide. Had the backing of my first wife then, and I told her what I was going to do, and she was like, okay, if this is what you want to do, which, you know, the greatest thing about a fisherman is you got to have a great wingman, and that wingman's a wife to stand beside you, because it's not what it's all cut out to be. But anyway, it just started like that, and so I did. I quit the Y, started fishing. First, 3-4 years was a struggle, and then I just persistence paid off, and I made a successful run at it, business at it.
Very good. So Ray, how did you end up from the John boat all these years later to kayak fishing? I know you do a lot of kayak fishing.
Yes, we moved to Galveston probably in maybe 2003. We moved from Galveston to Lake City. And so I had fished a lot of spots in Galveston, so when I moved to Lake City, I was kind of lost. I was like, what do I do now? So I decided to go and try to buy a boat. So I went to the boat show, and I was looking at a Carolina skiff. And a fishing guide actually approached me, and he said, why don't you, go into kayaking? Well, back then, hardly anybody was kayaking. So I was thinking, a kayak? Are you kidding me? So, I said, okay, I'll give it a try. So he took me to one of the local tackle places that sell kayaks. And he told me that I needed to get a Wilderness Tarpon 140, which is one of the heavier kayaks and pretty durable. The price of it is a little bit higher, but it's very sturdy. So I decided to go into the kayak fishing. And the Wilderness Tarpon turned out to be a great buy. I mean, it was sturdy enough for me to kind of stand up on every now and then. And then it would also handle some waves. So that was great. After that, I started with one Wilderness Tarpon. I got two, and then I got a Hobie P14. And
Okay. So if people are, maybe the people that are watching this or listening to it, don't know much about kayaks, what's the difference between the basic differences between kayaks if you're wanting to use it for fishing all the time?
One of them is some of them have a small storage unit on the front of them, which is the P14. The Wilderness Tarpon, it doesn't have a storage unit, and if you're going to go into turbulent waters and things like that, I would really go with a P14 because it has a rudder under the bottom, and it also has the pedals, so you're able to control yourself in the current. With a Wilderness Tarpon, they don't have a pedal, so you have to row. So whenever you have turbulent current like that, it's hard for you to control the kayak. So to me, the P14 is a much sturdier boat. I would recommend it, to start out with, especially if you're going to be in turbulent waters.
Okay. So David, I'm sure you've gone through a fair share of boats building up to what you have now.
I wish I had all the money back.
Yeah. So what are people looking for if they're wanting to get into what you do, not necessarily as a guide, but just fishing out in the bay where you take your customers? What kind of boat is ideal for that kind of situation?
Man, for Galveston, it's such a toss-up because it depends on what you want to do. Do you want to fish backwater? Do you want to be able to fish all of Galveston Bay? Galveston Bay is big, over 600 square miles of water. So you really got to ask yourself, what am I going to do with the boat? Are you taking a family? And there's different price lines. You can still, is a boat affordable? Not like the days that I started. Like you could buy a 24-foot deep V boat with a 200 Johnson back in the early 90s for $24,000. So $24,000 isn't hardly going to buy you a motor. nowadays. So, but there's deals to be had, and you just have to look. You know, there's entry line boats that are still out there that you can get. You know, Carolina Skiff's one, but really, you know, but don't be afraid to buy used either, because there's a lot of people that buy a boat, use it for a year, and then come off of it and go like, this isn't for me. Like, number one, I got kids, I got school with the kids, I don't have time, I'm not using it. So there's deals to be had. So there's so many boats out there on the market, anywhere from an entry level boat, brand new, you can still get them at $45,000, all the way up to $150,000. Which is insane for me to even think of that, because I bought my house on the west end of Galveston Island in Jamaica Beach in 2001 and paid $72,000. So when people are paying like $100,000 for a boat, I'm thinking like, that's like that.
Half your
that's
house.
A third over my house.
Right.
It's like I can't even compute that. So.
Yeah. So Ray, what do you enjoy? I mean, you've been fishing for a long time. What do you enjoy about kayak fishing that makes you do that, as opposed to going out and spending all this money on a boat and going out halfway across the Gulf or the Bay or wherever, you know, places like where David's going? Because it's two different kinds of fishing that you guys are doing.
Right. One thing I really like about the kayak fishing is being in the areas where it's not a lot of boat traffic. And most of the time where I go, I'm by myself. You know, sometimes I'll fish, and if the fish not biting, I'll just kick back in my kayak and put my feet up and just enjoy the sun. You know, but that's the best thing about kayaking. I think it's the serenity and being able to relax without a lot of boat traffic and people being around.
So let me ask you, I'm going to ask you a similar question to him, but why didn't you go the kayak route? Because that was
I don't know
popular.
if I can get out of one. I may be able to get in one, but I don't know if I'd ever be able to stand out of one. I've never been in a kayak. But I get where he's saying, because I'm that way. I don't like to fish around a lot of people, even on my guided trips. And I'll tell people all the time, I'm like, hey, we're going to go do this. And they may have already know that, oh, well, they're catching fish over there. And I said, yeah, and if I wanted to fish with 100 of my closest friends, I would have gone to Walmart and picked them all up out of the store to come with me. I like to be alone too, you know, and just there's something about being able to be away from a lot of people catching fish that is just different than catching a bunch of fish where everybody's around you.
Right. In general, now you're taking customers out pretty regularly. I follow you quite a bit on social media. Is it pretty steady, like it seems to be, or is it kind of hit or miss?
No, it's hit or miss.
It's hit or miss.
Yeah, it's like the pictures lie, internet lies, Facebook groupies lie. So don't believe everything you see. But you know, you have your good days, you have your bad days. The more you go, the more good days you'll have, and the more bad days you'll have. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
You know, and you just got to go. Like right now, I'm not going anywhere. I'm borrowing boats because I'm looking for a new engine for mine. So. You know, at 65, I thought maybe I'd get 5 more years out of my motor, but my motor said, no, I'm done.
Yeah.
So
Ray, I know you're in kayaks a lot, and I know that people do, you know, sort of guided fishing with kayaks. Why didn't you take that route, or have you ever thought about doing that?
I did think about guiding at one point, but I didn't want to take the fun out of fishing for me. You know, I don't think that everybody's cut out to be a fishing guide, you know. I think that it takes a special person to be able to be a fishing guide and still be able to enjoy the fishing. And I figured with me, it just wouldn't be the way to go for me. I've been fishing with people before, and I enjoy fishing by myself. Better than I do with others, man, you know. You know, sometimes you find yourself, you know, retying their baits or, you know, baiting their hooks
Welcome
and things
to the
like
guide
that,
world.
right? Instead of catching fish.
You know, at least in their kayak, you can just send them go down there, and then if they mess up, go, oh, well.
So for people who may not be familiar with the area of the world that we live in, and is where we sit right now, you know, Galveston Bay, well, actually Galveston Island is probably, 20 miles from here, something like that, 25 miles?
No, it's not even that far.
It's not even that far.
It's like 15.
We're maybe a half an hour, 25, 30 minutes from Galveston. Now, the Galveston Bay kind of comes up around. It's not very far from here, but just to kind of give you an idea. So people who may not be familiar with that area, they don't know what do you catch out here. Now, locally, we hear a lot about trout, redfish, and drum.
That's-
but surely there's more species than that. Or is that kind of the staple?
No, that's really, I mean, everybody beats their chest. They go out now, they catch 3 speckled trout, and they think they did something. You know, if we had 4 people and we come back to the dock with 12 trout, which is a legal limit now,
Right.
we would have been like, this is a horrible day. Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, we're used to catching 40. So, if not more. So, you know, the fishing's still good, but it's different. Does that make any sense? Like the places you fish are different. You're fishing more, you know, you're kind of fishing more spots than you are like just taking a bay and where abundance of oyster reefs are live and just cutting a drift across it or reading the water and catching schools of speckled trout that are feeding on, you know, off the oyster reefs, because our oyster reefs are decimated in Galveston Bay. It's just horrible. And I can go into a whole show on that, and I'm not going to go there.
Okay.
But it's all changed. You know, is it good? Is it as good as it used to be? No. But I think every generation has a good. The people that fished in the 50s say it was great. The people that fished in the 50s did better than the guys in the 60s. The 60s better than the guys in the 70s. And so, but it's a downcline. I mean, everything is just a drop. Will we ever see it like I would say the best fishing I ever experienced was in the 80s. Will I ever see that again? Or the 80s and the 90s. Will I ever see that again? No. You know, people say, no, it's going to come back. I don't think it is. Just because of commerce, pollution. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons.
Right.
You know?
Right. Ray, are you seeing the same thing, sort of more the inland fishing areas that you fish?
I think that the building that they're doing around to improve the highways and things like that have affected a lot of the inshore fishing to me. You know, with the Seabrook area, Kemah, San Leon, all of those areas, they've started putting in new freeways, runways, you know, all of these different things. And it's actually, to me, I think it has either changed the migration pattern of the fish, or it's just that the salinity level may have changed, which I doubt it, you know, because that has more to do with the rain. But I don't know what it is, but I definitely can see a decline in the fishing inshore.
Yeah. And it's habitat. Number one, look, let's talk. I mean, he mentioned salinity level. It used to be we had rivers that actually brought water down. They didn't dam everything up, and they gave Galveston Bay the fresh water it needed to thrive. But now we don't get the freshwater flow, so on drought years, the bay gets hypersalinity,
Right.
like 20 to 30 parts per thousand. And then Houston floods, and guess what? All that water
rushes, yeah.
and in that concrete and in those ditches and everything else, what do you see? Pollution.
Right.
You see cups, papers, all kinds of trash, and all that gets flushed into the bay. And so, I mean, our bay system is just not, like the habitat's just getting eaten away. And now they're going through our bay system and they figure that, you know, not natural grass shoreline's not good enough. We got to rock it. So they're putting rocks to help the erosion from the bay, from the land, and they're rocking it rather than like trying to figure out, well, maybe you ought to look at maybe what's causing the erosion. Like the ship wakes. You're a kayaker. If you fish anywhere around Seabrook, you know those ship waves come all the way across that up to that shoreline.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And it just rakes it. And so what people in Seabrook doing? They're rocking their shoreline. So rock's not as good as natural grass, and nobody can tell me otherwise. So
Right. Now, every time I fished, especially when you're going out there by yourself, there's a lot of time to reflect. We're going to kind of shift the interview a little bit here towards maybe a spiritual side, because we're all 3 men of faith. And that was kind of the gist of this podcast, you know. And so talk about some of the times that you've had to reflect on spirituality, and I guess maybe taking in sort of like that grandiosity of what's around you. Ray, talk about maybe a more recent experience that you've had doing that.
Well, I actually went fishing this morning, and I started out, you know, just doing some artificial lures for flounder, which I'm terrible at catching. And I ended up talking to a gentleman, which happens most of the time. Somehow we end up getting on the subject of church or the Bible or
Jesus.
Or Christ and Jesus.
Yeah,
And that's exactly what happened this morning. I was out fishing, and one of the older gentlemen that was there, we started talking about Jesus and started talking about some of the challenges that we've had in life and how it's brought us to a great point to where we at this time. And he was expressing some of the challenges he had, some that I had, and we just, we really kind of bonded. You know what I mean? Almost had like a little church service out there while we was on the water. And surprisingly, that happens a lot.
Yeah. Let's just go this week. So my boat's been in the shop for a couple weeks. They're trying to figure out why it went in idle. Well, they finally did have a hole in the block. So my years of guiding, I'm going to be, I'm just turned 64, and I'm thinking, in my mind, I had 5 more years left. And I was just like, hey, man, I got 5 more years. The motor will last 5 more years. It's just a little hiccup why it's not idling. Well, it turned out to be catastrophic. So I need a new engine. So I had to sit back. My first thought was, I told my wife, I'm like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. She goes, well, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I'm just going to write, and I'll just start taking my Social Security now. And she just kind of looked at me. She goes, you're not going to miss it. And then I was like, well, let me reflect. And so I'll think about it. So I prayed about it overnight. And my fishing, like being on the boat is catching fish is just, that's just second, being with the people and being able to share a little bit about Jesus and what Jesus has done to my life. Because I use my boat as a platform.
Right.
I get them in the boat. Hey, they're captive, right? They got to hear it. But Jesus tells me when to shut up. Like, if I can tell, but it's amazing how many people want to hear it.
That's right.
Or have the same story. And so it's a bond. It's way more. And I tell people all the time, hey, my job is to take you out there and bring you back safe. The rest of it is up to the man upstairs. Right. And was I always like that? Absolutely not. I thought I was the greatest fisherman in the world, and that nobody was I'm going to catch more fish than anybody at the dock. And I did that for a number of years. And then God humbles you. Yeah. And then when I really found, who the Lord was, he humbled me even more. And now it's just like he's told me, he goes, hey, you're not going to just catch fish. You're going to catch people.
Right.
And so, and it's funny how, if you look in the scripture, Jesus used fishermen and shepherds, the lowest of the low.
Absolutely.
Back then. I mean, he didn't go and pick the righteous to say, follow me, and we're going to bring people to the cross. He brought people that were broken,
Ray, going back in your life, at what point in time did you start, discovering your own faith for yourself? A lot of times I grew up in the church,
right,
and that's all I've ever known. But then when I got in probably my late 30s, early 40s, then I started, and it took a long time for me. I'm kind of a slow learner in that regard.
Right.
Then I started kind of thinking, well, do I have the faith of my family, or do I have my own faith? And so I started developing my own faith at an older age after I'd gone through some things in life, What about yourself?
I think growing up, I thought that I was, being in the church, I thought that I was a true Christian and ready to handle the things of the world. And you think that as a young age. But more and more you start to talk to people, you start getting into the work environment, you start getting into different challenges at work and into the political side of it, so to say. You start to realize that you're still learning. You run into challenges in life which you have to call on God for to help you out of those situations. And sometimes he helps you right away. Sometimes he makes you go through it for a learning experience. But I think for each person, it happens at a different point in their life. Mm-hmm. I would have to say once I started working, probably about 19 or 20, is when I really started realizing that I didn't have it all down and that I had a ways to go. Mm-hmm. Now, I think about 40 is when it really started hitting home.
Exactly. Something about the big 40.
Is that what it is? 40?
Yeah, man. It's around those 40s, man. It's around the 40s.
That's
to where
funny.
you kind of wind it in a little bit. Mm-hmm. You stop doing the things you used to do when you were younger and started kind of getting on a better path in life.
David, how did faith change your life?
Ooh, man, you really want to go there?
Give us the abbreviated version.
Yeah, because you've heard my long version.
I have.
Yeah,
it's a good one too.
It's good. No, it's good. God took
Watch
me
that
down a path.
podcast with David to get the full story.
I knew who, everybody hears about Jesus. And so being a fisherman, you're on the water, you know that there's a creator. But I did not have a relationship with them. Right. And I didn't have a relationship with them until what year is it? 25? 2018.
Okay.
I think when my dad died in 2018, I got saved, and now he's taken me down a path that I can't even, and you've heard it, and I'm not going to repeat it again, but he's taken me down a path that just there's no way. And the people that knew me back then, they would tell you the same thing, that there's no, David Dillman, there ain't no way. Like, hey, and I had people throw that in my face going, dude, lay off Jesus, I know who you are. Well, no, you knew who I was.
Right.
But, I've been truly born again. I mean, he's like, am I perfect? No, I'm absolutely perfectly imperfect, but forgiven.
Right.
And so he's just, now I just try to live for him.
Right.
The best way I can, walk in obedience, and it's hard because he'll take you down roads to where you want me to do what? No, I'm not going to do that. And then you end up doing it, right?
Right. So do you think, we talked earlier about the challenges that fishing can put you through and how to overcome some of those things. Because if anyone's done any amount of fishing, it's not always a good day. You come back with a string or four.
Oh,
fish.
no. Or you're caught in a storm.
It's like golf the other way. It can be one of the most rewarding and yet the most trying, troublesome hobby, or in your case, a profession that you can ever experience. But when it's good, it's good.
Right.
When it's bad, it's
and
bad.
when it's bad, it's bad.
Yeah. And so going back into faith, you talked about kind of people who used to know you, and they may say they've got this idea of who David was in their mind, and you're saying, well, no, that's a different David. So for someone that's maybe a new believer, a new Christian, and they're going through that same thing, maybe they're a little older and they've got a lot more life as a non-believer behind them than they do as a believer so far.
Front of them.
Yeah, exactly. And people say, well, I know you, Bob, and there's no way. You can say what you want, but Bob, I know Bob. What would you say to them? How to overcome that?
That's the devil lying to you. And that's what it is. I mean, it's just lies. Don't believe the lies. When you get saved, when you say I do to Jesus, and it's a marriage, right? Because it's not just like this person's there. I mean, he's in your heart. He wants a relationship with you. And so I talk to him all the time. And look, there's no special way to talk to him. You just talk to him because he knows you. He created you. He knows what you're going to do before you even do it. So those people that are like, oh, you're driving down the road and you start thinking back of what you did, and like he paid the price, right? He shed his blood for you. It's your debt's been paid. There's no reason to even dwell on it. And he doesn't want, that's the devil telling you that you're just this person. Stop doing, stop saying that you're somebody else. Don't believe those lies. And that's what you have to do. Just don't believe the lies.
Right.
Ray,
what about yourself? Have you ever had that conversation with someone that may be struggling with faith, or maybe someone that's not a believer that's considering a believer, or a believer that's struggling with their own faith? And what did you say to them, maybe to help them out?
As he was saying before, people know the challenges are things you did in your past. And I talk to people all the time that have had rough past. But what I tell them is you have to let your light shine. And that if those people that say that you're this old guy that used to do those bad things and you hadn't changed, but if they're around you long enough, they'll notice a change, that there's something different about you. And that's what you want to do. You want to make that change, and you want to live more like Christ, so you'll be a shining light. So when those people see you, they know this is not the old David or the old Rayfield. It's just something about him now. And sometimes they'll say, I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's something about It's something about you. And then you'll have a chance to tell them about Jesus Christ and how he changed you from being the person that you used to be to the person you are now.
I agree. And so what happens? And you've known it, right? We're 10 years difference, but we lived. I think we have probably a lot of similarities in the way we grew up.
Right.
You got some people from your past that you probably still associate with.
Right.
And then God took away the other ones.
Right. Right.
And he does that.
Right.
And he will take away what's not of him.
That's right.
And those people will fall off. So I tell people all the time, people go, well, how do you I was talking, my sister does estate sales. I was talking to her new husband. She just got married this year. And he's really protective of my sister, which I love because her second husband was not. And so, but he's like, oh, I get so mad at these estate sales. These people try to steal from your sister, and I have to. And I'm like, and he's like, and I said, so do you ever like walk up to somebody and just go, let me pray for you? And he's like, what? And he goes, you ever ask him if you could just pray for him? And he goes, no. He goes, why? And I said, well, number one, here's what will happen. 2 things. Number one, they'll tell you, yes, you can pray for me. Number 2, they'll look at you like you're crazy and they'll leave you alone and they'll leave. And he's like, I never thought of that. I said, well, that's, that's typically what happens. It's either yes or they're going to look at you like you're a nut and you're going to leave, right?
Yeah, no, that you're right about that. So going from that into, and you alluded to this a little bit earlier, David, about doing some writing, okay? And so David writes a column for the Galveston Daily News, and then Ray is getting ready to embark on a similar column for a local newspaper, the Post newspaper out of Texas City. So kind of similar neighborhoods, in that area. David, how did you get involved with writing? Were you a writer at heart, or trained to be a writer, or how'd you get into it?
No. I was like, graduated from Bel Air High School 601 out of 609. So there was no way I was ever going to have a writing job. But I started writing for the Mariner magazine in Seabrook. Okay, and then it turned into something else. And so I started writing a little monthly column for them, and then it just kind of snowballed. And for a long time, and this is just me, I passed through the Galveston Daily News building on my way home from fishing every day over the causeway, and I'm thinking, man, I really want to, I would love to write that column, right? The Real Report, it's been around forever, Galveston Daily News, the oldest newspaper in Texas.
Yep.
So, and they still have a fishing column, and so I was like, I really want to write. Well, the previous writer, Captain Joe Kent, I had been married. I got married for the 3rd time in 2020. My wife and I were looking to move off the island, so we started looking at homes. God was closing every home that we wanted, right? Closing the door. So finally, I was going fishing one morning, and she goes, I got something to tell you. And I'm like, I don't want to hear it. So I walked out the door. I come back, and I said, I got something to tell you. And she goes, what? And I said, God told me last night he doesn't want us to move. And this was a Saturday night. And she goes, well, if you would have listened to me one little minute in the morning, I would have told you the same thing. And I said, okay, so we're in agreement. So Sunday morning, I get ready to go to church the following that Sunday, and this is almost 4 years ago. And I get an email on my email from Captain Joe Kent saying, hey, I'm going to retire in June. And they kind of want me to throw out a few names who would be interested in taking over this column, and I want to know if you're interested. And so I was like, and they want somebody that lives on the island. And I'm like, okay, God, now I kind of know where this was going, right? Because I was wondering, well, I want this house. But anyway, so long story short, I went and interviewed. We went with him, brought him my resume, made up a resume. Had very little writing experience, no college, right? I did go to Southwest Texas, and what is Texas State now, and HCC, and got an early childhood degree education for a 2-year deal. But other than that, nothing, like no journalism school or anything. So we talked. He took my application. He called me up a couple days later, and he goes, you're the only one I suggested to take my job. So I met with Michael Smith at the Galveston Daily News, and he just sat there in his office, and we talked for 10 minutes, and he looked, and he goes, well, I go, what? And he goes, Joe Kent recommended you. I'm not going to interview anybody else. You want the job? And that was it.
Wow.
And I enjoy the writing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I know I see those columns all the time. Is it a daily?
Daily.
It's a daily column.
Daily.
So talk about that workload. How do you plan all that out?
Man, it's weird because I'm an early morning person, so I typically wake up 3 o'clock in the morning. And if I'm fishing, I write my column early. I'm up at like 2 writing my column because I don't want to do it when I get home because I'm too tired.
Right.
So I write it in the morning, or typically, if I'm not fishing, I do it in the afternoon or mid-morning. I mean, it just depends on when my morning time is my God time and my writing time. So typically I'm at peace in the morning, and that's when I write them. And so I try to keep something in the hole. I'm always 2 or 3 columns ahead.
Right.
Especially this time of year when there's not
Right. It's really not
when there's not much
on.
to write about or going on. It's the same old thing. It's easy in the summer when people send me fishing reports. Then it becomes a lot easier. Other than that, a lot of times I don't have any subject to write about, and depend on, the Holy Spirit to give me something, and He's never failed me yet.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So now, Ray, as I said earlier, you're just kind of embarking on this process. You haven't done one yet. You're in that research learning mode. What have you learned so far? I know you've been doing a little bit of picking of brains and looking at some videos and stuff like that, and reading some things. What are you thinking so far?
I think that it's going to give me a great opportunity to talk about Jesus, first of all, and also try to educate the public on fishing. A lot of times I go fishing and people are just, throwing their bait in the water. They don't know what kind of weight to use. They don't know what kind of rod and reel they're supposed to have. And so I think that the column is going to give me a great opportunity to educate some people about fishing and kind of tie it in with Christianity,
Yeah.
And I think that's really important nowadays because I've had some, we have a lot of single parents, and a lot of times the dad is not there. And I've had parents message me on Instagram and Facebook, and they want to know what size hook to use, what size line to use, what size pole to use. So this would give me a broader, way of reaching more people instead of through Instagram and messaging that'll be able to educate them about fishing.
Okay. Now, how has social media, you talked about social media channels. I know you have Instagram, and I think you're working on a YouTube channel now to help get some of those videos out. David, I know you're real popular on your Facebook page. Do you have another social media page now, or are you kind of backing off of that?
I got Instagram. I've got my personal Facebook page, but if you go to it's mostly Jesus.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I do have a Galveston Bay fishing page on Facebook that has that's to do with fishing. I don't post a lot. I'm not a big picture taker and post a picture, but I'm not a big social media person. I just never got into like, hey, look at me, look at this fish we caught. It's just not. I don't know. At first I was, when it first came out, I thought, hey, I'm just going to go do this and post all kinds of pictures. Then I got away, and then I'm like, I think the Lord told me, hey, look, spread the gospel, right? And so.
So how can those channels, whether it's social media or it's a newspaper column, which some people say, well, that's more of a traditional media, which it is.
But
it
people
opens up.
like to read.
They do.
It's amazing. I'm amazed at how many people read my column, because I get feedback from it. Like I had a feedback from this man the other day, and he says he lives in League City. He's like 86 years old. He doesn't get to fish anymore, but every morning he reads my column. And he's like, I love the stories. Like, talk more, because I do write some stories. It's not a regular just, hey, Joe Blow went out and cast a line and caught this.
Right. It's not a news report.
I try to tell a story with everything I write. So, and he goes, I'd love to hearing your stories. So you keep writing the stories. And so, and I get the chance to put my faith in there. The Daily News gives me a leniency on that a little bit, which for newspaper print, man, it's remarkable.
Yeah, it is. It is. So with your column helping you get your word fishing and a little bit of the gospel out there, and then Ray, your social media, how's your social media helped you so far? Have you ever met anyone that follows you on your Instagram page? Say, hey, I follow you, I know you.
Yeah, I've met quite a few people that have met actually in the grocery stores, out at different fishing spots. Like I was out fishing this morning and I drove in and the guy was like, oh, I recognize your truck, because one of my, fishing logos is on the back of my truck, obviously. But I think that it is a modern day platform of newspaper, maybe, if I can put it that way, because a lot of the younger people tend to want to, they're drawn to social media. So I think that both of those platforms are needed, as well as the newspaper and, Instagram and Facebook. And to me, it's what you use it for. Like you were saying before, I try not to use it for, look what I caught today. I try to put a few little blurbs in there to draw a question, or to excite a little bit of thinking about fishing, which gives me the opportunity to bring up Jesus Christ in a lot of those, instances, and like I was saying about the single parents and things like that texting me, if that was on a newspaper, maybe they, prefer going to a social media rather than a newspaper,
right.
But like I said before, both of those platforms are needed. You know, Jesus Christ says that everything that you have is supposed to be used for His glory. That means everything. Instagram, Facebook, it's all in how you use it.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So tying up the interview, Ray, what's a good piece of advice you give to someone that might be considering fishing for the first time, especially like sort of the inland area that you fish the most?
Right. As far as bait is concerned, one of my little things is keep it basic. Keep it simple.
That's it.
You know, a lot of times you go on Facebook and there's this certain lure or this certain kind of hook you're supposed to have. Let's just keep it basic. Go and get you some dead shrimp. You know, get you a small hook, because you don't want to use too large of a hook because that limits the size fish that you catch. So you get you a small hook, you know, maybe a 3 or 4 ounce, maybe an ounce and a half weight. You know, if you're in Galveston, the beach is a great place to fish. Incoming tide, those first troughs real up close, they hold some of your best panfish, whiting, croaker, sand trout. And to a kid, that's a whale.
Right.
You know, once you get that kid to catch a small fish, it excites him. And from that point on, man, you know, a lot of them are just hooked.
Yeah, and then they'll grow with it.
And they'll grow with it. You know, perfect example of myself, and I'm sure, you know, that's how it started out for yourself.
Oh, yeah.
How about you, David? If people want to get off the shore and out in the bay, they got a little boat, or they want to maybe book a guided service with you.
Yeah.
What do you tell them?
Man, I can tell you, if you want to jump in the boat business and think this is what you want to do, you better sit back with a calculator and put the pencil to it all, and you'll find out going on trips with fishing guides in the long run will be a lot cheaper. And then you can learn. And then if you really want to jump into it, then jump into getting the boat, you know. Nowadays, look, and I'm going to say this, right? Nowadays, it seems like everybody that has a boat, everybody that fishes is a fishing guide.
That's so true.
Or they're
That's
like
so
a
true.
brand ambassador, right? They wear the shirt.
That's
they
so
got
true.
They
That's
got
so
the
true.
T-shirt, you
Right.
know, and man, that's all. And you look on YouTube and you're like, I want to be like them. Look and look.
Right.
That's a false image.
Right.
Let me tell you, that's
Right.
that's probably not really who they are, and that's probably a pretty big false image. So I just say, just keep it, and what he said at the best, keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
You go into a tackle
Right.
shop, and all that stuff on there is meant to catch you, not fish.
Right.
So get you some hooks, get
Yeah.
you some weights, get you some popping corks. Start with live shrimp.
Yeah.
You don't have to go buy a corky and go catch a fish on a corky to be successful.
That's right.
You know, and enjoy what God's
Enjoy it.
created, dude. It's like there's so much out there.
So true.
And
Enjoy
learn from the same people that, if you're going to the Texas City Dike and you see people fishing off the dike that are actually successful
Right.
doing it, walk
Learn
up
from
to them
them.
and talk to them, right? Don't text them, because they're probably not going to answer you while they're fishing. You like conversation, you know. I'm not a big texter. I'd rather pick up the phone and talk to somebody. So that's how you learn, and just learn and start diving in. Look, there's YouTube guys like this guy. I may have seen you. I hope you weren't the ones that almost got run over by a boat in the fog the other day. But anyway, I mean, you can.
Not that day.
That was, yeah, I saw that was Chambers County last Sunday.
Yeah, that was up north. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, but there's but you know, there's so many places you can go and learn, and don't buy. And the biggest thing is, don't buy into the hype.
Right.
You know, it's
Keep it
pretty.
simple.
It's easy. It's pretty
Absolutely.
simple, and you can get it inexpensively. You don't need a $200 reel
Right.
or a $400 rod
Right.
to go catch a fish. In fact, you can go catch a fish on a Snoopy rod and reel that they sell at Walmart. So you can get into it inexpensively and enjoy the sport, or enjoy. I don't even want to call it a sport. I think that's just enjoy the recreational entertainment that it is.
So, David, if anyone wants to follow you on the social media that you do have, or if they want to book a guided service with you, what's the best place for them to find that information?
Let's see. Well, Facebook, Galveston Bay Fishing, or my personal Facebook page, David C. Dillman. I mean, you can send me a friend request. It's going to take me a while to go through it. I have to check it out to make sure you're not a scammer.
Right.
I do, you know, on Galveston County Daily News, I do a daily fishing report or daily article there in the newspaper, Galveston County Daily News. Where else? Where's the Fish in Kemah?
Okay.
It's a podcast that we do. It's called Where's, W-H-E-R, with a question mark, S, the fish. And we talk about all kinds of things from in that on Facebook. You can pick it up on Facebook. So there's different things you can pick up.
Okay. And Ray, how about yourself? Talk about some of your social media channels if people want to either follow you or ask you questions, etc.
For Facebook, I'm under Chuck Conley, which is Chuck is my nickname. And on the Instagram, I'm under Fisher_man_Ray.
Okay. Very good. Well, guys, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your
Absolutely.
experiences, not just with fishing, but with faith. And God bless both of you.
Thank you for
Likewise.
having us.
Thank you
Happy
for
New
having
Year.
us.
And Happy New Year to you all.
Likewise.